Today on CityCast DC, it's our Friday News Roundup, and we are talking about what a Trump return to work order might mean for local DC. We're going to talk about a novel type of apartment that's about to make its local debut, and we've got some reactions to our annual end-of-year awards, the CityCast 6. I'm here with my CityCast comrades, Priyanka Tilve and Julia Karen. Today is Friday, December 13th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Julia, how's it going?
It's good, Mike. How are you?
Good. Hey, Priyanka.
Hello.
So for folks who have been paying attention at home, before we get to the Friday News Roundup, they may note that today, Friday, is the final day of our December membership campaign. And I believe I've mentioned before that there is a tote involved.
Yo, the tote is sick. Have you seen it?
That might be the first tote in history to be described as sick.
Probably.
And look, you can use it to advertise not just how much you dig us, but to find friends, because other people will see it. They'll say, I listen to CityCast too. And you'll either be able to say, cool, we can be friends, or, hey, are you a member? Because that's how I got this.
Ooh, very true. Very true.
And then they'll say, how do I become a member? And you'll say,
go to membership.citycast.fm.
In all seriousness, we love what we do here at CityCast, but it is a lot of work, and your membership really, really does help us a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, you're doing it partially for the tote, but really you're doing it to support local journalism. And it's the year end. I've been spending a lot of time over the last week kind of thinking about our big successes this year. We interviewed Mayor Bowser, we interviewed the head of Metro, we've interviewed a council member. We've also had a bunch of really fun episodes with some influencers. Big Schlim, if you're familiar with him, he's like that food vlogger. We've had him on a few times to give some recs.
Jade from Clockout DC has also been a frequent guest. Also, we've had a ton of live events that you guys have come to and have made awesome.
And then, of course, we've had the CityCast 6, our end-of-year awards, which we start planning for that in August. We do a bunch of calls, a bunch of research, and then assemble a panel of experts. We also got all of your votes in. All of this takes so much coordination, and member support is what makes it possible.
You know, my day job, I write a column about kind of capital W national Washington for Politico, but I've spent a lot of my career covering hometown DC, which is, in fact, my hometown. And I get to do CityCast as sort of a labor of love on the side. But the folks who produce the show, the folks who market the show, the folks who research the show, they work full time on it, and they work their tails off. I'm a witness to this, and they make it really good. It's not cheap to make a show like this. I know that we make it seem easy, but it's not. And the money helps underwrite that. A lot of the stuff we do is we sort of find storytellers, reporters about DC, experts about DC, people who've written books, people who have gone out into the world and discovered things, and we bring them on and we help them tell their story in a way that sort of is comprehensible and connects you to this place that we live, work, and play, and does so in a deeper way than you might get by just simply, reading the news.
The free tote doesn't hurt either. Listen, if you want to spot us in the wild and give us a shout out, membership.citycast.fm. Get that tote, get that swag. Also support local journalism. It really does make a difference, and it really does help.
And it's a mere $8 a month or $80 a year.
And you get ad-free listening. Yeah, once again, membership.citycast.fm. Thank you so much to people who are already members also. We really appreciate your support.
All right, dudes, let's round up the news.
Let's do it.
All right, so this week, one of the big themes that we've been talking about ad nauseum this year is the sort of looming fate of DC in the Trump era. And there's a whole lot of different dimensions to it, but involving home rule and what happens to that, involving, our federal workforce and what happens to their jobs. And the sort of the first meeting of DC Mayor Muriel Bowser and the newly empowered congressional Republicans who are about to have a trifecta happened this week. There was an oversight hearing on the Hill. This is often a place where members of Congress ask Budinsky questions about culture war things that their district may be on one side of and ours is on the other. But this time there was actually like a pretty big area of agreement, which is that Bowser, like, every big city mayor, wants the biggest industry of her city to make its people come back to work every day, come back to the office every day. And in this case, she is going to talk to the bosses of that industry, which is to say legislators and the executive branch, to try to put the arm on them to say, get your people back in the office 5 days a week. And this is a thing which Republicans on the Hill and in the incoming Trump administration also want to do. It's a little different in their case. They believe that lazy federal workers are at home loafing instead of being on the job and making the rent the government pays for its buildings worthwhile. Bowser, on the other hand, thinks that, or knows that having like a 50% occupancy rate in downtown offices, which is what it's been lately, is lousy for the sort of local economy in downtown Washington, because a lot of those people come in from the suburbs. Insofar as they're going out to lunch where they're working now, that's not padding the DC tax rolls.
Well, it's also like significantly fewer people even considering going to lunch downtown, right? You go downtown in the middle of the workday, it's pretty quiet down there, which is obviously a big struggle for the businesses. It is interesting to see such vastly different values and goals converge into one unified action plan here.
The Biden administration made noises about bringing everyone back too, and it didn't happen in nearly the volume that the city wanted. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is there's labor contracts governing telework, so you can't, or they thought you couldn't just snap a finger and say everyone back. Another is, private sector gets to, it has a lot of flexibility, and the government's thinking about competition that, it's going to be harder for us to recruit employees if by coming to work for us, they find themselves handcuffed about their location in a way that you wouldn't if you went to work for a private sector company.
Right. And I guess in the case of the Trump administration, they're like, great.
Yes, exactly.
We want fewer people working in federal government. So yeah, let's make it a less appealing job.
That's exactly right. So let's say they were able, to circumvent whatever labor objections there are here and just do this thing. What kind of difference do you think it would make in downtown? I mean, there are, of the roughly 800,000 jobs that were located in DC pre-pandemic, about 200,000 of them are federal.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really interesting calculus that we're going to be doing here because, like we were just saying, it's going to make federal jobs less appealing. So are there still going to be 200,000 federal jobs in DC at the end of whatever process they are planning to undergo? Are we going to see instead 150,000 federal jobs in DC, but all of those workers are downtown? Obviously, that's still more people downtown. So maybe we will see a more vibrant city.
I mean, it's very understandable. And if the biggest industry of Washington was like the insurance industry, the mayor of DC would be going to the heads of the insurance companies and saying, please order your people back to work. This is not a sort of a government specific thing. It just so happens that government, which has a more complicated managerial structure, is the biggest or the highest profile industry here. But one of the things DC has done that is very commendable in the last few years is that the absence of the government workers and the absence of, for that matter, the private sector workers has sort of forced Washington to grapple with look, we've got this sort of office canyon part of downtown with really not a whole lot else going on other than people working 9 to 5 in cubicles. And that is not sustainable going forward. And this is true whatever the Trump administration does with federal workers in the next 4 years, because the way the world works is changing. And so, DC has adopted this sort of all of the above strategy. They're trying to move more residential downtown. They shelled out to keep sort of bread and circuses with the arena and so on. These are smart things to do. And in a way, the sort of crisis atmosphere post-pandemic and the sense of holy cow, Washington, which is supposed to be, immune to the big kinds of job disruptions that hit other cities, was not immune to this. And we'd better actually sort of think in a more creative and nimble way. I'm glad they did that. And I hope that, even if there's a magic wand that brings every single public and private sector worker back to wherever they were physically located in pre-pandemic, I hope that nimbleness and that sort of creative approach doesn't go away, because it can be needed at some point. Even pre-pandemic, downtown was different.
I think that's absolutely true. It's good to see the city trying to kind of fire on all cylinders in terms of every single possible path that they could pursue to make the city a more exciting and vivacious place to live again.
The other thing is that whoever runs the city, they're going to have a bunch of ugly ass fights with the Republicans in the Trump administration and especially on the Hill in the next 4 years. So I think it's pretty smart politics to begin with a place where they actually, maybe see eye to eye. Bowser's sort of superpower has been to, find areas of agreement that sort of diffuse highly impassioned issues and kind of take her off the shit lists of her critics or of some critics. And, that's a tall order when it comes to Congress and to Trump, who I think really loathes the fact that she did the Black Lives Matter Plaza. But this is sort of where the political instincts of this administration are going. And it'll be interesting to see how far they get.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to just quickly note that there were a few instances of disagreement at the congressional hearing.
Of course there were.
Earlier this week. But I think, like Mike's saying, it was really smart. She kind of sidestepped them. So, for example, they asked if DC would comply with federal immigration officials if there are orders for mass deportations. And Bowser just kind of coyly said, we will follow the law. And she didn't really specify what law she's referring to, like local or federal.
Love that little legalese slip in there.
Yeah, they just kind of moved along. There's also the fact that this year's federal budget for DC includes 13 riders that will restrict how the city uses its funding. This would have been the meeting, the oversight hearing, to bring that up and try and talk about it. But again, she just kind of let it slide. One of those riders is the one that's been there forever about banning the commercialization of cannabis in DC. There's also a provision that would block the district from letting non-citizens vote in local elections, which this year was the first year that DC actually had that law allowing non-citizens to vote. So that could be taken away really quickly. But again, yeah, Bowser just focused on the spaces where they could find common ground, which some people might say is
a cop-out?
Yeah, or cowering in some way. But I think it is a smart tone to go into this administration with, and then we can kind of sneak the fight in.
The Post had a kind of jaw-dropping story, jaw-dropping to me at least, of the council changing the name of a couple pieces of legislation to avoid triggering right-wing members of Congress. But this notion of they're going to make themselves a smaller target in the next few years. And, there's a part of you that wants the sort of satisfaction of we're going to stand up for our principles and, be loud and proud. And, justice demands that people get to call their own shots. But if you're trying to accomplish things and you look at the actual laws governing DC, there's a lot of arguments for making yourself a small target. And I think, again, with Muriel Bowser specifically, that has been her political instinct in general, and it's served her pretty well. So you guys, speaking of the mayor, she was on the CityCast 6 list. For people who didn't listen to that episode, which was scintillating, Priyanka, explain what CityCast 6 is, how we got here, what we do.
Yeah. Okay. So the CityCast 6 is our CityCast DC end of year awards. It's something we look forward to throughout the year. It's very exciting. We pick 6 categories. So this year, the categories were arts and culture, business and development, music, food and drink, of course, politics. And then for the first time ever, we had a reader and listener submitted award called Your Local Hero. So those were our 6 categories over the course of the fall. With the exception of Your Local Hero, we do a ton of research on these 5 other categories. We call up journalists around town who focus on these categories as their beat. We read every possible article we can ourselves, and we come up with some short lists, which we then present to, again, readers and listeners for a vote, as well as our panel of experts. So this year, our panel was Michael Bryce Sadler from the Washington Post, Anna Spiegel from Axios DC, and Dan Reed from Greater Washington. And then, of course, our 2 hosts, Mike and Bridget Todd. All of them confer and then come to a consensus on who transformed the city most in their category.
For good or ill.
Right, exactly. It's not about like who is the best in this category, but it's about who changed the city, again, for good or bad, the most in 2024. So it's been really fun. The episode came out on Monday, and it's really been fun over the course of this week to see how people are responding to the CityCast 6, and especially to see how the people who won have responded. For example, Flower Factory was our winner for the CityCast 6 Award in Arts and Culture. They're a queer collective that organizes parties, like mostly dance parties around the city. And they sent us this really sweet 1 minute long soundbite about how they felt when they heard that they'd won. So here it is.
Hi, CityCast. This is Bumper from Flower Factory. Please excuse my voice as we just had a Flower Factory yesterday and our guest DJ played Jennifer Hudson's I Am Telling You from Dreamgirls in totality to end their set, and I could not resist. First off, thank you all for doing the work in local journalism. It's such good and important work, and it's exactly why things like the Flower Factory get the opportunity to get recognized. I speak for the entire Flower Factory family when I say that we're so honored by this award. To be recognized by our community is amazing, but to take it a step further and to be recognized specifically for the culture is something that we don't take lightly. A huge part of queer culture is celebrating each other when no one else will, and giving each other the space to do that, and that's exactly why we do this. Our goal has always been to create a space for top-notch musical talent in our community to have a platform and for people to feel free to be themselves. And not only do we have that, but Flower Factory has grown into a cornucopia of expression and queer joy beyond our wildest dreams. And we truly pinch ourselves every time we get to do it, even 4 years later. We would be nothing without our community and the amazing people that come to our parties and create the very culture we're being awarded for. So shout out to the Factorettes. Thank you. Thank you, CityCast. This means so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Aw, that's so sweet. I'm so excited for them. Dang.
Well, I got a text from someone close to the mayor that I think was displeased with the fact that I referred to her political style as boring. I was using that word as a compliment. I think there's some cities out there with exciting mayors who are always in the news. There's some countries out there that are about to have exciting presidents. And I think a lot of people would prefer placid lack of perpetual conflict. But she seemed to not be so down on us.
Yeah, well, yeah. So Mayor Bowser won the CityCast 6 Award for politics. And we interviewed her really briefly earlier this week. Our host, Bridget Todd, conducted the interview because we wanted to know how she felt about the win and also what she thought was her top moment of the year. And here's what she said.
Mayor Bowser, I am so excited to be talking to you today. I have to ask, how does it feel to be one of our CityCast 6 winners in politics this year?
Well, I feel amazing.
You know, it's been a tumultuous year for DC, a lot of ups and downs. In all of that, what do you think was your biggest accomplishment this year?
Well, we are excited for a lot of things, but most excited that we turned around what could have been a very sad thing for DC to watch our Wizards and our Capitals move out, to instead having the decision to stay at least until 2050, buying the Cap One Arena, investing in Gallery Place Chinatown to the tune of almost $1 billion, having 8 big ideas, and seeing them start to happen. So we're really excited about a turnaround story.
The Capital One Arena situation was the main reason why our panelists chose you as our most impactful CityCast 6 in the politics section this year. What was your biggest takeaway from that whole experience?
My biggest takeaway is something that drives me in everything that I do, actually, in politics, and that is to never give up. And I believe in that. Whether we're talking about how we're going to close down a dilapidated homeless shelter and build short-term family housing, or get a turnaround piece of public safety legislation. You always got to push, push, push. Don't take no for an answer, and do what you think is best for DC until the door is absolutely closed shut. There's always a window of opportunity.
So yeah, of course, she also acknowledged that the discussion over Capital One Arena and her negotiations with Ted Leonsis were kind of the highlight of the year. If you listen to the deliberations from Monday, you'll hear that that was also the main thing that the CityCast 6 panel talked about as why they felt like Mayor Bowser deserved this win. But they also talked about how that kind of negotiation tactic and diplomacy is so important for the city right now, like we were just talking about, as the Trump administration prepares to come into office. And so, of course, since we had Mayor Bowser on a call, we had to ask her about how she is preparing for and like considering her approach to President-elect Donald Trump.
Obviously, a big, we'll call it challenge on the horizon is President-elect Donald Trump coming back into office and having done so on this record of really threatening to interfere in D.C. affairs. How are you kind of planning to approach that?
Well, and you're talking about a lot of anxiety that people have. I feel like I'm managing that anxiety in almost every conversation I have. And I try to remind people a few things. First, we've been here before. There has been a President Donald Trump. We supported his inaugural activities in 2017. We tried to find common ground on issues that the federal government and DC government share. And that will be our approach this time as well, to work with the president. Whoever the people send us is the job of the DC mayor.
Are there any specific threats that your administration is sensing that he might, pose for DC specifically? Like we did an episode about sort of the temperature generally that folks are feeling, but are there things that are on your radar as like, I might want to watch this?
Well, I think the answer is that's true of any new administration, that you're going to kind of watch what a new relationship is. Obviously, we don't walk around with our heads in the sand. We know some of the things that have been said, and we know some of our unique vulnerabilities. But we also have to deal with facts. Sometimes when I listen to the press, you would think that Donald Trump could walk down Pennsylvania Avenue with a magic wand and take over the district. That's not actually what the law allows, okay? Even in the case of a potential takeover of UDC, there are very specific things that a president could do. They would be extraordinary. They would be emergency. And they may be even challenging the law, but it's not exactly a magic wand. Similarly, are there threats to home rule? Well, the Congress actually would have to do that. And I just think with the agenda that we've heard so far outlined by the Republicans, I'm not sure that DC is their number one issue. Having said that, we have to be prepared for any potential attack to represent and defend the district.
Are there ways that DC could further protect itself from attacks on things like home rule?
Yes, statehood. Being admitted as the 51st state is the only real way that we can ensure that we don't have congressional interference or interference from this president or a future president.
Do you see that happening?
Yes, it will happen.
That was a very emphatic yes.
It will happen. Yeah, I also believe in kind of the cosmic energy of what's right, and it's right. And we've gotten over many of the objections that have kind of fallen by the wayside to only leave the objections of partisanship. And we want more Democrats than Republicans. And that will, eventually we will knock down that objection.
And just for the record, the social media response to that award was perhaps less favorable.
Not exactly.
And not for the reasons that my critics said.
No, yeah. There have been a lot of emojis, I would say. Not the happy emojis. But I do feel like people make those kind of judgments without listening to the episode a lot of time.
Or to note that we are trying to do this to measure impact, not necessarily the positivity of that impact. I think she had a successful year as a politician, but you might, if you don't like her politics, you might not be happy with that success.
Exactly.
I mean, if you want to talk about positivity in a different way, though, Nucci from Nucci's Live from the Front Porch, who won our music category, sent us a little note, said, "Hey, I'm super appreciative of this acknowledgement. It feels good to put on for your city, and your city recognize it." Yeah, there is something to your city recognizing the work that you do day in and day out.
Nucci is a local rapper, but he has created this massive YouTube sensation of like hosting other big name artists like Robin Thicke, like we're talking big name artists, on his porch and then having it go viral. And it's kind of brought a new life to music in DC, and specifically go-go music in DC, because a lot of times these artists will perform some of their most popular songs, but with like a little bit of a go-go tinge to it. So that's really exciting and feels very, very local and beautiful.
And then we had a first ever Hero Award that was based on public submissions.
Yeah. And this year, we had a lot of great nominations, including a few readers and listeners who nominated CityCast DC. So thank you to those people. I hope you're members. But the winner ended up being The 51st, which is a new outlet that started this year. It was started by several reporters who used to work at DCist before it was shut down. And so they sent us this voice note.
We're thrilled that our little startup has been named a CityCast 6 Community Hero, but we literally wouldn't exist today without the support of the community. We took a risk with our launch, and it's only thanks to the folks who believed in the importance of worker-led local news and trusted in our mission that we're able to publish every week. So in a way, everyone who has ever read a 51st story, subscribed to our newsletter, signed up to be a paying member, or donated to our campaign is the real hero here. And we couldn't be more excited to see what we can keep making together.
I thought that was really sweet. I will say there has been an outpouring of support for the 51st.
They were stoked. They were thrilled.
Just to mention them, the last two winners, our food and drink winner was Michael Rafidi, who owns Albi, Yellow, highly decorated chef in the DC area. He just opened up La Shukran, which I've heard is absolutely delicious, and I'm very excited to try it. That's in Union Market area. So that was our food and drink winner. And then the CityCast 6 winner for business and development was Virginia Senator Eloise Lucas, who is a hilarious follow on social media. So if you don't follow her, go do that. She was instrumental in kind of tanking Ted Leonsis' plan to move the Wizards and Capitals to Virginia.
And for all we know, she's never set foot in the District of Columbia.
Very true. Maybe.
Possibly.
For all we know.
For all we know. So yeah, so that was our CityCast 6. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We hope you enjoyed this process. We, like I said, love doing this, but we want to hear more from you. So if you have any thoughts on any of our winners, please get in touch. You can email us at dc@citycast.fm.
All right, so a new type of apartment opening in DC. To me, it looks a little bit like an SRO hotel, but I think it's being branded a lot more high-end. What is it, Julia? You've been reading about this obsessively.
So I sort of lived in one of these when I studied abroad in London, and it's really interesting. In this case, there's a Belgian developer. It's called Cohabs. They opened their first project in Columbia Heights. It's a 10,000 square foot co-living space on Chapin Street. They converted it from these 2 townhomes, and it's got 36 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, and a bunch of other amenities like weekly cleaning of common spaces. And they've got other projects that they want to start on in Southeast and Northwest. Basically, what they do is each thing has its own bedroom. So you get your own bedroom and a shared community space. The bedrooms range from 74 to 160 square feet, and rent is between $1,650 and $2,000 a month. But the rent includes all utilities, weekly cleaning of the common spaces, a monthly breakfast, and a monthly delivery of basic supplies like toiletries and kitchen ingredients. The building on Chapin Street also has 2 large kitchens for residents to share, a gym, several common areas, a rooftop, backyard patio, and a co-working space.
So it's like a dorm.
Yes, it's very similar to like a dorm. Basically, you share a kitchen in a common area with a bunch of other people, but you get your own like sleeping area.
I always had a theory that like DC for people in their early 20s is kind of like boarding school, but where like the chaperones are away forever. And this sort of fits that. But here's the thing, like this city's always been a place where like group houses have been a big part of 20-something young professional living. They're not just for like bohemians or whatever. Like people will live in their group house and then put on their tie in the morning and go to work at a law firm or a congressional office or whatever.
Often on an e-scooter. Just to fit the vibe.
That was because there wasn't enough apartment capacity for them. But also it's because it was kind of a deal. And so when I hear these prices, that's awfully high for living in a place where you got to deal with someone else's stuff in your bathroom who you didn't get to pick the way you might at a group house.
Like Julia was saying, it does include breakfast and like weekly cleaning, but it still seems at least a third higher than I would expect for group house living. A lot of this does seem appealing. Like, I think that there's a loneliness epidemic, right? And so living among people that hopefully you like and, you know, rubbing shoulders at the, like in the morning while you're making breakfast or having a easy place to co-work and make friends does seem appealing. I think it's the shared fridge and the shared bathroom that I just would not be able to deal with.
Well, and the who gets to pick the new roommate. That's which is, you know, a thing that some group house people have like got down to it. You know, there's interview process, there's this whole thing. But do you guys think this is going to be successful?
Maybe. I mean, if you think of how a group house operates, this is basically the same or similar-ish to having a group house, but someone else cleans your stuff instead of you having to clean the gross bathroom or you having to clean the grody kitchen, right? Like there is kind of that nice little aspect of like, I don't have to clean up after myself. That is a big plus. The other thing that Cohabs, this company, wants to take advantage of is the fact that like DC has a really transient population still. And so what they're doing is they're like trying to partner with universities to try to house students. They're also marketing to embassies for people who need like short-term living arrangements, who literally just like basically need a bed, right? Like that I think is the goal here, is they want people who basically just need a good place to sleep. And I think in that regard, there are plenty of people who would want that.
So the other thing is, this is, I think, contingent on the notion that DC is super expensive and hard to find residents in, which has certainly been the case. But now, as we were talking about earlier, whether it will still be the case if a lot of jobs are moved out of the city or whatnot, you know, that's an open question. Obviously, this company, which, you know, presumably has owners or shareholders or whatever to answer to, has made a bet that it ain't going to change. But, you know, we'll see. Like, let's check back in a year or two.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this one goes. There was another cohabitating company that had stuff in the DC area. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy recently, so that's not good. But apparently Cohabs, this company, they own the buildings here. So the other place, I guess, didn't. So they have a little more flexibility and can earn more money. So we'll see if this one actually sticks around. It'll be interesting to see.
Will be interesting to see.
Julia, Priyanka, awesome to see you guys.
Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you too.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, and Ash Durbin. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, seriously, think about that tote bag. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.